Welcome back to the Padilla Family Homestead. Today we are outside in the garden and I am going to answer a question video form that I have been asked a few times in the last week or so, and it's easier to kind of show the pictures and to show you what I'm talking about. So that's what I'm going to do, and we're talking about squash that is not getting completely pollinated. So if the end of your blossom of your squash, where the blossom is starting to grow and then it turns, half of it turns yellow at that blossom end and is all wrinkly and starts to die out and then turns brown, that means it probably wasn't pollinated. And so I want to show you some tricks and tips for dealing with squash and where squash comes from. So I'm going to flip this camera around and show you our summer squash plants. Actually, do you know what? I'm going to show you some flowers also on the winter squash, because this concept works for winter squash. It works for cucumbers. It works for all kinds of things. But the summer squash is primarily the one where this happens a lot. So since I'm standing right here, I'm going to show you the spaghetti squash. And I can easily show you the different types of flowers. So this is a male flower. Stem starting to grow. There is no fruit behind it. Think like humans. Males don't carry the babies. Females do. A male flower has no fruit behind it. You do not get fruit ever on a male flower. So there's a misconception that once this gets pollinated, that's when the fruit pops up, or that does not happen. So this will never produce a squash. However, let's see if I can find a really tiny one. Oh, look, right here. This is a super tiny one right here, where there's a spaghetti squash on the back side of this flower. And so eventually that will continue to grow, and let's see, it will start to grow like this one, and then it'll get even bigger. And it's at this point when that flower is already opened. So I'm hoping this one got pollinated because this one opened during a storm. And so I'm going to show you on the summer squash as well. But over here, this, you can see there is a fruit behind this. This is a female squash. So at this point, if it goes another few days and this first part gets wrinkly and yellow, that means this didn't pollinate. So it won't grow to full size. If it starts to grow to full size, then it will. Now we have lots of bees around here, and I'm not super worried about pollination right now in our garden. However, I'm going to show you how to hand pollinate this over on the summer squash. It'll be the same concept here on the winter squash, but I have good examples that I can do on the summer squash. Okay, so our summer squash is up here, and this is our lemon squash, and I have a really good examples right here available to me. So again, that's a male flower. This is a male flower. This one right here is a male flower, and if you look on the inside, there is a single stamen there. Okay, one single thing with pollen on it. Now this is a female flower. This one's already been pollinated. I'm going to bring you around and show you the inside. So this is the inside of a female flower. It looks different. So all female squash will be slightly different, but that is the female flower. That has the squash at the end of it. So even when the flowers are open, you can tell. Now, if you're concerned that this is not getting pollinated, I'm going to show you how to do this by hand. So when we're looking at this plant, you can see there were lots of flowers. All these ends that don't have anything on them, those were all male flowers. Most of the time, your squash will start producing male flowers first, and that is going to bring pollinators to the garden. They want to hang out. They want to get that pollen and bring it back to their families and do with it as they will. If it's a bee, work on making honey and so forth and feeding. And so they want to access this. So the male flowers bring in the pollinators ahead of time. If your plant is putting out female flowers first, you're not going to get fruit from those because you have to have a male flower to pollinate. So what you can do is take a paintbrush. I'm not going to do this type right now, but you could take a paintbrush and you can just rub on there and get pollen off and put it onto the female flowers center part there. But what I'm going to do for the sake of this video and for being one-handed is I'm actually going to take off these petals right now. If you're not holding a camera, you can take it off first and then do this, but I'm holding a camera, so I'm going to go this route. Okay, so I have this off. My husband says this is the inappropriate time in the garden where children should not be around. It makes me giggle. Oh, see, that's pollinating it right there. It had pollen from a male flower, and it put pollen on that by climbing on it, and that was enough to pollinate it. I'm still going to show you this because I think it's important to know in case you don't have bees. So you take this end. I'm actually going to open that up just a little more. Okay, so I have it pulled back like this, and you take this end and you just rub it all over that inner section right there. Kind of messed up the flower, which is okay, but I know it has pollen now, and that will produce a fruit, which will be a squash. And so that is how you hand pollinate. You can do this with, like I said, you could do this with squash, any type of squash. So our zucchini needs to be tied back up. But I've got zucchini down here that a caterpillar is trying to get to. So we have a zucchini down here where I made sure that was done. I also did it on this one because I just wasn't positive, but that's going to grow. Any type of squash, you can do this. This is a scalloped or a patty pan, and you can see how many male flowers have been on here. There's so many, and we're just starting to get our first female flowers. And again, there's lots of bees down here. So there's a bee on the male, and it just flew into the female flower. So I know that's getting pollinated. I'm not even going to bother with it. Now, I will point out that I have a lemon squash, a zucchini, a rondinese, and a scallop squash, all in the same area. I believe these are all in the same family of squash as well. I don't remember all the names. There's like Peppo and forgetting the other one. I think it starts with a P. And so a lot of times your pumpkins are primarily one. A lot of your summer squash will be hop between two of them. Your winter squash will hop between two of them. And they can cross-pollinate. So that bee that's flying over there probably flew over here first. It's probably the same bee that flew into the male, flew into the female, and then it goes over here, flies into a male, flies into a female, and it's going to cross-pollinate. Now, that's not going to affect this year's squash. It will not affect that. What it's going to do is the seeds that are produced, if you want to try to save seeds from it, then that is going to be cross-pollinating. It's not going to probably be true to variety. Now, summer squash, we pick young. So if you want to save seed from a summer squash, you need to let it grow and harden like a winter squash and get full size, and then be able to save seed from that at that point. At the point we pick this summer squash, it is immature and its seeds are not huge. And you can tell, like if you cut open a zucchini, unless you let them get baby size, they're going to be much smaller seeds than, say, an acorn squash or a pumpkin or so forth, because their seeds are not totally mature. We are eating them young as soft skin. So I hope that helps with that explanation as well when it comes to cross-pollinating. I do not want to touch this guy, but I do want it off of my squash. He needs to stop trying to eat my squash. Alright, so this same thing stands true when it comes to melons, which I need to pop that melon up here. So let's see if I can show you on this one. I don't think I can really. I'm going to bring you over here to this one. So I have some little baby bush watermelons starting here. And you had to have had male flowers and female flowers. So that would have been a male flower growing at the same time for these to pollinate. So we have male flowers here. This is attaching to it. And then this little guy right here is a female flower. So again, on the melons, you can also you can also hand pollinate if you need to. Same thing with your cucumber. They're going to show, female is going to show your little fruits. Males are not. Again, these really put off a lot of flowers before they set out any female ones. So back over here under the tunnel, this thing was covered in flowers, but it was all male flowers. Everything was a male flower. I think I only have like a handful of female flowers popping up on here right now. This plant is huge, but it's bringing in all the pollinators before it tries to produce any type of fruit, which is good because we have a lot of pollinators now. So I hope this helps answer some of the questions on why my squash may not be pollinating, or why it's all wrinkly on the end, what's happening to it. It's usually not blossom end rot when it comes to the squash. It's usually a pollination issue, and how to solve it, whether it be using a paintbrush or a Q-tip and taking pollen from the male flower to the female flower, or it's ripping off one of those male flowers and just rubbing it into a female one. Maybe if you have a huge lack of pollination, you need to look at why. Are you putting something down that's killing all the bees? It's one of the reasons why we haven't put diatomaceous earth on the garden, to stop some of the pests that we're dealing with, because we know it's going to cause issues with some of the pollinators. And so those are all things to look at. Moths can pollinate. Wasps can pollinate. There's lots of things that can pollinate. So if you have a lack of pollinators, maybe add some flowers in that are really going to attract in the pollinators. Do things that attract them, not deter them from coming in, because we do need pollinators in the garden to get some of our things. Now, peppers and tomatoes have everything that they need inside their one flower to produce the fruit. So those you just need to shake around. You don't need to take pollen from one flower to another flower. Every flower will produce something. Now you can get hybrid breeds of cucumber. I don't know about squash, but you can get hybrid breeds of cucumber that are for greenhouses where you don't have pollinators. So every single one of them is a female flower, and they have all the, whatever they need in there to produce cucumbers. So that's up to you if that's something you want to work towards. I'm not growing in a greenhouse. We're outside. I don't mind having bees around the garden. And so I'm just letting them do their thing. But having lived in an apartment, I dealt with my fair share of fruits not being pollinated and rotting on the end, and figuring out how to resolve that issue so I can get produce and I'm not just growing something that's just growing rotting fruit. So that's it for today's video. I hope this helped. If you have any other questions, drop them in the comments below. If you have any other tips and tricks when it comes to pollinating, you can drop those down below. If you have a lot of questions about cross-pollination and how to stop that, then I would, I've never done it because I feel like the flowers fall off super easy, but I believe that you can close off that flower once you've hand pollinated it, and close it with like a rubber band or something, and then that will stop bees from bringing in other pollen. But you kind of need to catch it before bees get to it, and then you need to close it before they can get into it again. And so that was never been worth it to me. Or just grow one type of family of squash. And if you look at their official names, so like a zucchini isn't the family class it's in. It's I don't remember what it is. If I remember, I'll put it down below here. But there's 3 types for squash, which include the pumpkins, winter squash, and summer squash. And so just plant one variety of each of those families and they won't cross-pollinate. Just like a cucumber won't cross-pollinate with a tomato or a squash. They each have their own family and they don't cross-breed. So that's it. We hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you on the next video.